Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Gibby and Ian here talking some Set 7 Lorcana cards before the set releases in a couple weeks on March 7th. We are going to give you some of our sleeper picks, our bust picks for cards, some color combinations that we think that you should be targeting that isn't getting enough love, maybe some bust picks as well for things that are getting too much hype, and then some overall thoughts on the set, some hot takes that we think you should pay attention to before you start collecting and buying cards for the set here in a couple of weeks. Ian, do you have your cart ready? Do you got some cards that you're targeting? You've got your list made like a talent scout?
Yeah, man. I one of these times we're gonna do a buy list for one of these sets. It's interesting. We've got a bunch of new videos that are going to be coming out in the next couple weeks to support the new set, so stay tuned. But this is one of the weirdest sets, I think, where I look at the cards and I go, there's a couple of standouts. I mean, obviously the elephant in the room is Bell, and Tamatoa probably too. So you're going to want to get those in your collection if you can. They're going to be, Tamatoa is going to be pricey no matter what you do. Fortunately, Bell does come in the starter deck, so that's pretty nice. But I think the thing that's interesting is there's so many cards this set that just feel like question marks. Like I look at it and I'm like, is this a must buy? Maybe.
It's funny. I think people are going to buy Mushu just because they want to play Mushu, and it's regardless of how good the card is. Granted, I do think it'll be a really good card, but people just want the character. They've been calling for it for so long, so that's a little bit of a different conversation.
I think this is a very exciting set and fun set, but that's not what we're here to talk about. Not really. I mean, you and I are more focused on the competitive side for this video because we kind of want to talk about cards from like a collection building perspective, both for newer players that are taking the game seriously and want to know what is important to buy and what's not important to buy, but also like we've even got some bold predictions for like what decks do we think could surge and maybe some that might, they might wane a little bit as the set progresses. So, but yeah, let's get into it. Gibby, I mean, do we want to talk individual cards first?
Yeah, let's talk individual cards first. So let's talk about a couple cards that we think right now the price is a little depressed on TCG Player or other markets in which you would buy singles if you were to purchase them outside of buying packs and just hoping that you get lucky and pull these certain cards. We're looking at cards that maybe the value isn't super high on them right now if you were to buy the single, but we do expect that they will be getting up there in price as more people catch on to how valuable these cards are. So we're calling our must-buy early targets.
Yeah.
I think something that you and I both agree on, let's go with our common pick here first. Gantu Experienced Enforcer from Steel is a card that is just so good, and the value of it is so unique that you and I both have come to the same conclusion here. 4 cost, 2/4, uninkable. When you play this character, characters cannot exert songs until the start of your next turn, so you just shut down your opponent being able to sing songs until your next turn, and then statically and immediately, each player pays 2 more to play actions or items. Yeah. This is such a unique card with so many effects to it.
Yeah, right now we have this early pre-order price, which these are always hyperinflated, right? So like I wouldn't actually expect this to stay at $10 for very long. Within the first week or two, it'll go down. However, Gibby and I are thinking it might have a chance to go right back up once some big tournaments happen. I think Gantu is just such a unique effect. And specifically, not even just its instant effect of turning off songs for a turn, kind of like Pete, which turns off all actions. But it's really the secondary effect that I think is, potentially game and meta warping. It's very easy for Steel to build decks where they either only include a small amount of removal in order to get a little bit of early oppression, right? And then move into a phase where, hey, I'm just trying to aggro out, resilient units, the Lawrences, the Petes, Gantu, and maybe a big 5-drop Gantu. Who knows? But I think that the idea that this affects not just actions but items, especially when we think we're going to be moving into an item-focused metagame with Bell and Tamatoa. Sapphire Steel already looks very impressive. So Fortispheres and Popsicles costing 3 instead of 1 is a very big dampening effect on the card draw engines of those decks. So Gantu feels like the kind of card you're going to want to get 4 copies of. relatively quickly. Whether or not 4 becomes the number, I couldn't be sure. But for my money, I would take this as a card that will surge once the DLCs get announced, once the Worlds happens. I would expect, and this is again a predictions video, but I would expect Gantu to be heavily featured in decks that are not trying to do item things.
Yeah, I think overall, I mean, this is just has such a wide variety of applicability. I mean, while it doesn't specifically say it, something that we do need to keep in mind is so the first part of the text, shutting down songs, having your opponent being able to exert to sing songs, that specifically calls out songs, but all songs are actions.
Yeah.
So those are also included in the back half of the text too for the rest of the game as long as Gantu stays alive. The songs and actions will count will cost 2 more. So I think this is a card. It's very akin to Pete, the 3-drop Pete that everyone plays. That it just shuts down turns, and like your opponent, when you get to a high level of competition, is planning their turns a couple turns ahead, especially what they're inking, what they're playing, and they're trying to set up these board states to try and take over the game. And Gantu is a disruptor that your opponent sometimes just can't count on, or maybe they suboptimally play trying to account for a Gantu.
Yeah, I think if you're a newer player and you are looking at trying to be as judicious in collecting as possible, unless you are going to get a king's ransom for trading this, I would say hold on to this and look to trade some of the legendaries that some of the players who have been around for a while are going to be looking to fill out in their collection. This is the kind of card that is going to be, my prediction is this is going to be a pseudo staple. Not quite at the level of Pete because it's uninkable, but this is the card I would hold on to for a while to see how it shakes out.
Okay, I'm going to move on to my next card that I think is going to be a buy now card, buy early before this card shoots in price, is Aladdin Research Assistant. Aladdin says when this character quests, you may play an ally character with cost 3 or less for free. Finally, we're getting some ally synergy. There are a plethora of allies in the game that we've accumulated over the past 6 sets. And then while this character is exerted, your ally characters gain +1 attack. It's quests for 2 as well, so it's getting you a good, healthy amount of lore as you're getting this ability too. It's 4 cost and inkable, 2/4 in steel. Similar to the 5 cost Jasmine character that is the top half of this art, Jasmine also has a very valuable questing effect here of when you don't have any cards in your hand, you can gain a card for each ally. But Aladdin kind of making your board go wider and then being the catalyst that is going to make Jasmine more effective, assuming that you bring out a 3 cost or less ally, and there's a lot of really great ones in steel. I mean, you can look at Mr. Smee as your 2-drop. You can look at Lawrence as a 3-drop.
Yeah,
Zipper.
Especially.
I've built one of the early decks that I built was a Sapphire Steel ally focused aggressive deck. There's a lot of
stay tuned for a video coming next week.
Yeah, well, where I will break down that deck along with a deck from every other color combination, but. Sapphire Steel, I do think, has a lot of great questers, has a lot of great allies, which makes Aladdin a perfect fit into this meta to be able to help you keep up with either tempo decks, aggressive decks in general, and go wide and just provide you great value and capitalize on the follow-up that is Jasmine at that 5 cost slot.
Yeah, so it's funny. Gibby and I both like this Aladdin. I think the Jasmine I'm sort of undecided on. I'll be interested to see how it plays in testing. But nonetheless, I think any card like this that really warps costs is pretty interesting. And setting aside the fact that, hey, steel has a lot of great targets for a 3 cost or less ally. I mean, that's all internal to steel. And this Aladdin, unlike the Jasmine, is just steel. So you could see yourself pairing this with, obviously, Sapphire if you wanted to TPO into an Aladdin and then quest and get a body out. That's pretty cool. But if you didn't, you could play this in a Amber Steel Mufasa shell, right? And potentially play out some allies from there. You could
Doc is an ally. Dock, 2 cost Dock as an ally.
Yeah. Three cost dock and 2 cost dock. Both docks are allies. So I mean, yeah, there's some really cool stuff. I mean, being able to quest and play a dock, draw 2 cards, and then use the ink you would have spent on the dock on them. That's pretty cool. I just think it's really unique, and anything that says free has my attention. And like, figure this in kind of like how the Robin Hood Sharpshooter. Now, Robin Hood Sharpshooter has not yet proven to be like a competitive meta staple, but it has been like almost there for a while now. And I think eventually Robin Hood Sharpshooter will be like a thing. And Aladdin is very much a similar thing. Like, at the stage of the game that you can play this down, yes, it can be brawled. But that's about it. It's got a chunky butt and quest for 2 and gets an effect when you quest. It's kind of one of those things that signals to your opponent, like, deal with me now or else. That's pretty cool, especially when you have so much card draw like off of dead hands, whether it's through Jasmine or Doc. I don't think you're probably playing this in Whole New World, but still, you have some of that stuff native to Steel. I just think it's really potent. I can see a green Steel deck that uses this too. Green has a lot of good allies as well. So anyways, cool stuff. Good pick, Gibby.
Thank you. Now on to your must-buy early target, the second of your 2. Shere Khan, Infamous Tiger. So Ian, go ahead and tell us about Shere Khan.
Yeah, man. I think that I think this card is going to be underrated early, so I think that you'll be able to pick this up pretty cheap or trade for it in your community groups, because people are going to look at the discard your hand part and freak out. But I am freaking out in the opposite direction. I'm like, well, what if my hand's already empty? A 4/4 that quests for 4? That's incredible. And, there is already examples of decks like Doc decks that do not mind going down to an empty hand size if it means putting board pressure out. I think Shere Khan has a chance of being a top end of a very, very fast hyper aggro style deck. I am already intrigued in a Emerald Amethyst hyper aggro, utilizing this in the same way that an Amber Amethyst hyper aggro deck utilizes some of their top end cards, and just sort of goes like, I'm going to go to a dead hand. I'm going to have Chromacons out. I can, just sort of draw my way into threats turn after turn after turn and gain a bunch of lore from like White Rose and Goat and stuff. And I think this is a card that could fit into a shell like that. So I'm pretty optimistic about this card. And again, the prediction that I have is that it's going to be undervalued early, and then somebody will solve for it and include it in a pretty good deck, and the price will go back up. So, if that is true, you'll be glad that you got them early.
Yeah, and if you're looking for a shell to be able to target this with, like we said earlier, stay tuned for our video upcoming where we're going to be previewing a bunch of decks that we think you can play immediately when this set drops and they be like cohesive and viable. That exact Amethyst Emerald hyper aggro deck that includes a Shere Khan and those Chromacons and all of those instant lore gain cards will be one that we also preview. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some cards that we think that you should pump the brakes on buying, that either already have inflated costs, or we just don't think that the value of the card in general is going to be there, and maybe is being a little overhyped from a theorycraft perspective, or people are inflating the cost just because they want to talk about the card and it's in maybe a unique or a cool effect, but we just don't think it's going to be that good. So, Ian, let's go ahead and run through your first don't rush to buy card. Well, we can't really select one on the screen. It's all of the Duel Links.
Yeah.
So tell us why you don't think Duel Link cards are going to be useful, or you should wait on them.
Yeah, so I think that Duel Link cards are the new novelty of Lorcana. You're going to see all of the locals trying to force dual color cards to work. And what that means is you're going to see the singles market sort of have these Duel Link cards higher than they would normally be from a novelty perspective. And then when people realize that, if my opinion holds true, most of the Duel Link cards aren't very good, or the ones that are good have very niche value, which typically indicates from a pricing perspective that they will be less than $1 or $2, right? Cards that have niche value are the cards that tend to, regardless of rarity, dump in price. Like, just they tank. Even if unless it's part of the best deck in format. I mean, you're looking at stuff that just like people want to make it. it all comes back down to like the economics. Like people want to make investments in cards that are going to be good in multiple decks, right? So, I mean, you can look at a card like Flynn Rider and you're like, man, Flynn Rider is best in Ruby Amethyst, but it's good in other things, right? So maybe Flynn Rider rises in price. These Duel Link cards are only playable within those combinations. So I expect the prices to tank. And I don't know if they're very good. Like, not in this current metagame, right? Like, I think they're cool. I think they're novel. I'm excited to mess with them. But, I mean, I think you look at a lot of the ones that, like, I mean, you can see a few, like, Perdita's really interesting, but only if puppies are okay, right? You can look at what I think is the best dual color card, which is, oh, where is it? Lady, right? But even this card, which is just generally good, is only going to be good in an Amber Emerald aggro deck. That's a lot of conditions, right? And so I just expect this card, which is like pre-ordering at $10. I don't think this is going to hold at that price. And this is, I think, the best one. So I say wait to buy Duel Link cards, or if you're a new player, trade them with the other players in your community aggressively. Like seriously, get what you can while you can. Sell high on these cards if you're really looking to build out your collection from older sets. I have all this advice, and we'll have to do a video, but for new players on like how to build their collection, and a new set dropping is the perfect time to capitalize on hype. For players like Gibby and I, where we have pretty much everything, we have extras of staple cards that we're willing to wheel and deal to get the new stuff. So
responsibly,
I would say, especially the rare and super rare Duel Link cards, I would sell high while you can. And if you're looking to buy and you're willing to be patient, just pump the brakes for a couple weeks. You'll be able to get them cheap.
Yeah, we'll have to do a video on that about how to, like, I don't know, morally correctly and responsibly trade and gain the value of and shape your collection in ways that you can create some value and get cards in your collection that will last you the stand of time. Mm-hmm. My don't rush buy candidate as well is also a category, albeit a little bit more of a niche one, and you can just search that keyword. It's all of the illusion cards from this set. I do not think that the illusion cards for set 7 are going to be that great, or the ones that deal with illusion cards. Granted, there's only a good 4 or 5 of them right now. I mean, so there you go. I think there's 4 cards in total, being that Treasure Guardian, Iago, the Cobra, and
Jafar.
Well, yeah, there's a couple. Jafar and the Bolt play with the illusion cards, but they aren't illusion cards, I don't think.
The Guardian, the Treasure Guardian, and Jafar synergize with illusions. Bolt kills illusions for whatever reason. And then Raja, Iago, and Giant Cobra are all the illusion cards
that have the vanish ability.
That have the vanish keyword. Yeah.
And the whole point of these illusion cards is that they are supposed to be overstated, but there is a different, unique way to remove them if you target them with any sort of an action. If your opponent targets them with any sort of action. I think that is such a broad category because it doesn't count cards that you would initially use targeting your own characters, whether it's a small buff or cantrip kind of cards like improvise, whatever it might be. Like, there are cards that are generic enough in their text that say give chosen character blank, whether it's meant for your character or your opposing character, and those essentially just turn into immediate kill cards on what are meant to be overstated characters, and none of them really quest well either. So I personally think these cards are, not to say that they won't have value later on, but there is not a deck I foresee in this current set, either at the beginning nor the end, that makes use of these illusion cards. By the end of the set, I guarantee you'll be able to get all of these cards, maybe with the exception of Bolt. I don't know.
Well, Bolt I don't consider part of this because Bolt is not an illusion. The Bolt banishes illusions. So let's just
it's just like an additional effect. It's like it's kind of whatever.
Yeah.
But all of the illusion, all of the amethyst and steel cards you see here on the screen, pump the brakes on them. You'll be able to get all of them for under $1 by the end of the set.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think the only one, and so, like, I mean, the ones that would be pricey would be these two, right? because they're rares and super rares. This Jafar, I think you're exactly right. Like, don't rush to get it. It's overhyped. I don't think it's that good. This Iago, I think it has some niche playability, but again, I don't think it's going to be a staple. I think the one thing that I look at is like I'd maybe hold on to Giant Cobras, just because it gets you an instant lore grab, which Amethyst Steel aggro is already a thing. So maybe this one is a common. So like whether or not this proves to be good or not, it's a common. You'll get a million of them. But these two specifically, I totally agree. I think people are gonna like salivate at the mouth to play these because they're like, oh boy, stats and synergy, and I just don't think it's worth it.
You can't kill me with your brawls. Well, okay. Well, they actually that Iago is going to die to everything.
I suspect we will see more illusion support next set for Reign of Jafar, right? And maybe this changes then. But like, keep in mind that if for whatever reason a illusion deck were to like be really good and like surge at a tournament, all people have to do is include a handful of tech cards that just target things.
Exactly.
And you can deal with all of them at the same time. So like, I agree. I think that maybe one or two of them might be a supplementary card in an existing archetype. I don't think this rare and the super rare is worth chasing down. I totally agree.
Yeah. All right. Now we're going to expand the conversation here. We're going to talk kind of including decks that currently exist from the current meta. Mm-hmm. Looking forward, looking into our crystal ball, into set 7. What do we think are going to be either new archetypes with cards that have new abilities that we're seeing from set 7 so far previewed, or existing ones that we think set 7 cards are going to supplement and fall into, and that are either going to cause them to cause other archetypes to fall out of the meta or emerge as new archetypes that just become staples in the meta. So, Ian, what is your meta dark horse deck that you think is just going to, that people should be paying more attention to?
Yeah, so this is my big brain 200 IQ play where we'll see if it proves right. It probably won't, but I look at the fact that I think that early talk is item decks are going to be specifically Sapphire Steel and probably Ruby Sapphire. Let's be honest. Ruby Sapphire might take an early dip, but Ruby Sapphire is a deck that by the end of formats tends to be the best deck in format, right? I'm not saying that it will win everything, but that it's the deck that everyone's worried about. I don't see any reason that both of those decks don't start the format as top contenders. And specifically, I think the concern around it is Bell. Bell enables these decks, especially Sapphire Steel, but even Ruby Sapphire, if they want to play the unconventional tool, it enables these decks to get a big body on the board on turn 1, like right away, a 3/3. Holy crap. And what that does is it shores up their aggro matchups, which historically were poor, especially Ruby Sapphire, because it gets a body out there that can immediately start answering things, and often answering 2 things, because there's very few aggro cards that can actually like on turn 1 or even on turn 2 like deal 3 damage right back. I mean, you're talking about Smee, right? And even then, the whole reason Smee is so good in steel aggro decks is because it often can live multiple things, or it kills something and it forces them to hit into it. I think that that's going to be really devastating for aggro decks. I think we're going to see a dip in aggro outside of maybe evasive aggro, right? Because evasives do get around it. And I think that like my other dark horse is actually just Amethyst Emerald with a bunch of evasives to try to get through the Ruby Sapphire. It's going to struggle against Sapphire Steel. But my actual dark horse pick, I told you all that so I can tell you this, is Amber Emerald Discard. One of the things that I foresee with these item decks is their commitment to the Bell play, because it's going to be so essential to winning the early turns against aggro decks, is actually going to like slightly reduce their hand size and their options early. Right, they're going to have to sell out a lot to build to get those bells and those quick starts on their mulligans, and so they're also going to run into scenarios more often where if they commit that early bell, they will miss on Hiram having an item on turn 4. It's not going to happen every game, but it will happen some games, right? The answer in my brain and we'll see if this pans out, is that I think Amber Emerald's ability to set up hard to interact with discard engines, right? The Diablos, which have evasive, which Bell can't touch. Prince John, which can be hit by a grab your swords, which maybe Sapphire Steel works back in, but otherwise, like, Tink's not dealing with it, right? And then annihilating their hand with Bare Necessities, Sudden Chill, You Have Forgotten Me, Cricky, or not Cricky, Lucifer, all of those things. I just think that, like, the package is there to hand destroy the item decks in a very targeted meta. And then you always have the ability, and there are a few more song support cards. I'm none that I'm like salivating over for this deck, but I also just think the ability to like always reset a board off of an Under the Sea play is really promising. And if aggro decks do have to adapt away from the hyper aggro approach that they had been using on red blue, I think, and they have to do more of like a more attrition mid-rangey style, that only plays further into the Under the Sea combo because it gives you the like more time to set it up. So I think Under the Sea Amber Emerald discard has a chance to, like, it was in the meta 2 sets ago. It was completely absent last set, but that was because aggro was so fast and so consistent, and that deck doesn't have good answers for fast aggro. I think that we will see aggro take a step back, so I can see discard and maybe Emerald Steel as well. I can see those decks taking a step forward.
Very interesting. Yeah, I mean, discard already has enough synergy, and it was almost just like an adaptation where it really didn't do well the past couple of sets just based on what else was out there. I mean, it did fine in set 5, right? But it was great in set 5. But in set 6, yeah, we didn't really see it perform as strong despite all of the tools and help and synergies still being there. And we didn't lose any of those tools. It's just going to be more of, does it respond well to what everybody else is currently playing and what else others are perceiving to be strong out there in the meta. So my Dark Horse deck is going to be Amber Sapphire Puppies, which is going to be a new version of a meta deck, I think, in the set 7. The reason that I think it is going to be strong, you got several tools from set 7 that I look at and I'm like, those cards just make sense, and it's not hard to envision how they make an impact in the card. So we got a couple extra puppies themselves, but even just some of there's like these mid-range tools that they got, like Perdita Playful Mother, the 4 cost that when she quests, you pay 2 less for the next puppy character you play, and gives all of your puppy characters wards, so helps prevents from some big damage like steel decks like that. Shoring up against steel decks or red decks where there's damage movement, putting ward on everything is huge. Thunderbolt having a universal puppy shift on 3 that is a bodyguard, and it's going to allow you to start expanding out all of your other cards onto the board safely. Also plays really well on curve with such a huge defense stat of 7 into something that is already a fantastic card, probably the most expensive card in the game currently, being Rapunzel. Rapunzel still exists in Amber, so you're healing, you are continuing to flood the board, and the puppies themselves being 2/3s and all the other cards that you're putting out there, you're going to have a very solid statted deck. And there's even lore explosions with, I think it's Lucky, that says if you have X
Lucky's
number of
really
cards,
cool.
if you have X number of more cards, characters on the board, then everything else gains +1 lore for questing.
Yeah.
Like you've almost got a burst win condition as well.
He also is cool because he also has, like, if you're in a situation where your board has been diminished, he can draw you more cards. If you're in a situation where your board is big, he can help you close games. It's pretty cool. It'll be interesting to see how. I feel like Puppies is a cool Dark Horse pick because, like, it's a fun theme deck almost. But the other thing is that, like, there's some genuine power to having an ability to swarm with characters with big willpower. Because here's the plus and minus. If Ruby Sapphire is really good, this deck's going to suck. Like this deck is going to suck into big CC.
Because of their high attack counts and being able to attack challenge like readied characters and all of that. It's gonna be very tough for this deck to survive.
To survive Ruby Sapphire. Well, I'm saying because I think that all of the stuff is 2 or 1 attack. I mean, everything's going to die to big Sisus, and baby Sisus even. But if we live in a steel meta, then I think this has a lot of promise. I like the canine crunchies, by the way. Very cool. And actually, like for the first time, maybe like good item that you just want to sit on the board. There's not a lot of items that are like passive powers that just sit on the board that are, you know, relevant, like just not much. So this is like the first time, and they tend to overcost them. And this is like 1 ink, inkable, gives a strong passive ability to a tribal archetype. Like I want to see more. You like
don't have to exert to do it either, or like pay to exert to do it. Like it's just a thing. It's like Rapunzel's tower, but on an item cheaper and appropriately costed.
Yeah, and inkable. Thank God. So, anyways, I think there's potential there, depending on how the meta shifts. If we live in a steel meta, I think puppies are on the board.
Yeah, I just foresee this also. But I also just foresee this being an archetype that there is something to be said for. We used to talk about this a lot in sports from the different kinds of plays or offenses that we would run when we played together. There's something to be said for running a somewhat simplistic, straightforward, easy to digest way forward to be able to execute at a high level. And I do think overall, compared to other meta decks, the puppies, there is going to be some high level big brain plays that you can make with some tricks here and there within the deck, depending on how you structure it. But I think as a whole, the idea of what puppies wants to accomplish and how to make it run is going to be rather streamlined. It's going to be easy to digest for all levels of players. Well, so that's why I think it's going to be good.
I do think I agree with that, but I also think that the thing that appeals to me about puppies and hope, I really would love to see this be relevant in the meta. Even if even if it's not like a top 5 deck, like if it is present in the meta, I'll be very happy because obviously Amber, Sapphire has struggled, and there's been some hero aggro decks, but this is really unique. I think the thing that will be really cool about it is it's a good entry point deck for new players because the cards are strong, the cards are synergistic, so it's easy to understand, and most of the cards I suspect will end up being pretty cheap. So this will be like an awesome budget deck. I mean, my area and my card store in particular has a lot of newer players, families that are trying to get into the game, kids that want to learn and are excited about the game, but they are always like drawn to themes. And this is really cool because I feel like it's the first theme that actually feels supported. Like we got all the 7 dwarves, and it was like, well, most of these are garbage, right?
Like how, I can't play knights.
They're trying to figure out how to make theme decks a little bit better, and I applaud them for it. So that's really cool. Let's move on to our bold predictions here, Gibby. So this is where we wanted to make a sweeping prediction, each of us, about how will this set be remembered. Compared to all of the other sets we've had and theoretically sets we have in the future. And I don't know if we agree on this. So Gibby, give me your take, and then I'll give you mine.
All right. Spicy intake coming. I think this is going to be the most impactful set since Rise of the Floodborn in Season 2. And a big portion of that, I personally believe, is going to be the dueling cards, despite your feeling that you should pump the brakes on buying some dueling cards. And that's not to say that your take is that dueling cards are bad or that they aren't going to be good, but you think that they're going to be overvalued and overpriced early, and by later on they will be maybe worth collecting or worth buying once the kind of the salt shakes out, and you can kind of figure out which ones are good and which ones aren't. The reason that I think that the dueling cards are really strong is the way Lorcana currently sits, with the exception of maybe 2 colors, which I would say is Ruby, Steel, and Sapphire, Amber. Those 2 color combinations really haven't performed well for, I'll say, the last 4 or 5 sets at minimum.
Yeah,
in the meta, or maybe ever.
I would say never.
Every other color combination has had its heyday in this game. Now, I think what would make these dueling cards more niche or harder to adjust to and less applicable is if we had very specific color combinations that did well, and a lot of the Duel Link cards weren't applicable. But because we have such a wide variety of applicability,
Yeah.
I think one thing that Ravensburger did really well with the Duel Link cards was keeping the effects very on brand for the themes of the colors. So a lot of the unit bolstering in Amber, or healing or ramping within Sapphire,
Right.
Damage in Steel, or damage movement or self damage in Ruby. Those themes still maintained within the essence of what these Duel Link cards are. I think it's a very slippery slope, is going to be one of my additional kind of hot takes to this, is because I think the Duel Link cards are going to be very powerful, in my opinion. I think the Duel Link cards are going to be very powerful, in my opinion, because it's not going to be hard to slot them into already existing archetypes
Yeah.
out there. What I do think is that they need to prevent these Duel Link cards from being too powerful, because they think that they're niche when they're really not going to be hard to fit in, and you're basically just adding additional really powerful cards to existing archetypes that really don't have a downside. It's not like you have to pay an additional building cost to include Duel Link cards.
Yeah, I mean they're right. I understand what you're saying. I mean it's an interesting take. I will and sound off in the comments. Which one of us you feel like is on the right track here. My take on this is looking at some of the card designs. I got this impression. I got this feeling. And part of it is like some of the item support stuff, because like we had seen a few sets where like item support had been like faded in Sapphire for some other stuff. And that felt like understandable, because like, wow, like Lucky Dime decks have been good since, was it Inklands when it came out? Yeah. Inklands, like Dime decks.
Yes.
And we got some more ramp options, right? But what we didn't see was like a ton of payoff cards coming in to contest the Tamatoa and Lucky Dime and Dragon. And, we did get Maui Half Shark. I don't even know if that was the direction that the devs expected that to go. Is this, burn archetype within red blue, which by the way, I think will still be very, very good. But it feels like they reinvested in what Sapphire was already good at. And what that signals to me is perhaps this is setting up a rotation announcement sometime in the next year, and that this set may be included or be one of the first sets that will be not rotating. And so like if in fact old Tamatoa goes and Lucky Dime goes, then that would make sense why they're printing cards like the Bell and Bell, like obvious, like Bell comes in early and then you shift onto Bell and you dump all of the items that you put into the discard pile, and that's your finisher as opposed to the Lucky Dime, combination, right? The Tamatoas are there to like set up the Sapphire Steel, decks that want to like, churn through cards and whatnot. So my point with that, right, is I don't know this. I have no insider information. It's a change in direction from what they've been doing. And if set rotation does happen, and this is included in set rotation, I think we will look at the set as very influential and a large, like, part of deck building in a post-rotation world. Because there is in a lot, and like you can look at some of the like Duel Link cards and go like, man, this would be great if all this other meta stuff didn't exist, right? If all this stuff from the first 4, 5, 6 sets wasn't so much better in Conglomerate. But if that stuff is gone, or some of that stuff is gone, let's just say even the first 4 sets are gone, right? Then this becomes a foundational set for deck building in the competitive scene. Without that, my opinion is it's going to be seen as a gimmick set. And until that happens, I think this set is going to largely be viewed from the lens of like, wow, these Duel Links are interesting and they're mostly bad. And it's going to be the set that gave us Bell, and that's going to be it. And that's an exaggeration, but I do think that is my take on this, is that the set is not as good as the hype around it. And I get the hype. I'm hyped. I'm really excited to try this stuff because I want to scratch that Johnny itch and build something unique. But I think from the competitive level, I think we're going to see a lot of the same decks adding in a handful of cards, and then moving around what those changes are. So we'll see how that shapes up.
Yeah. How you feel about the Duel Link cards going forward not being applicable or as influential right now, but maybe in a post set where they get to hit the reset, or a post rotation where they get to hit the reset button and there's a smaller card pool to pull from. And then in order to keep this set relevant, they had to be at least somewhat on par with the power level of the accumulation of the first 6 sets. They are going to feel strong at that point. That is how I feel about some of the single ink legendaries that we would be really hyped for and excited for had they been like set 3 or set 4, somewhere in there.
Totally,
If I flash back in time, and I think that's how I think about a post rotation world of, if I flash back in time and think about these cards in early sets, how would I feel about them? And I think they would feel good then, even though I'm not as super hyped about some of the single ink, more rare cards now.
Right.
While I do think those cards will do better in a post rotation, I do think personally the Duel Link cards will have an impact. I do think they are strong enough. So as Ian said, let us know in the comments down below if you agree with me, if you agree with him. What are your opinions on some of these Duel Link cards? Ian, hit us with your big picture hot take that you think the people should know for set 7.
Oh, that was my hot take.
Oh, it's just that in general that they're going to be bad.
Let's do the outro.
Okay. All right, there you have it. We've given you cards. We've given you color combos. We've given you hot takes on set 7. Tell us what you think down below. We are going to be just as hype as everybody else to get our hands on these set 7 cards. We're going to be deck building like crazy. Keep in tune for the channel for several videos upcoming that are going to be Lorcana focused. We're going to be giving you a bunch of Lorcana content before and after release, and we'll see you on the next one.